you are synonymous with what the lifeboat people are about, the effort you put into it, the way you've inspired, your current position. Jimmy, you are a remarkable lifeboat person. You're symbolic of all these wonderful people who are within the institution. For my own part, I was very lucky. Michael Killallen, Lord Michael Killallen, he's chairman of the Olympic Committee, he invited me to join lifeboats. And Jimmy and I were just talking about this earlier on. And at that stage, there were hardly any lifeboat stations on the West Coast. In fact, Jimmy was telling me there were 3. And his objective was to get the managing committee, who've always been generous to Ireland, to address the issue of coverage on the West Coast. And Michael Killallen's legacy, apart from being Olympic president, is the stations that are stretched north and south along the west coast of Ireland. And I was proud to work with him on that. I don't want to be too heavy on that, but I went into the managing committee, and I think I was the only commoner there, Jimmy. It was all admirables and lords and ladies. And this commoner from Ireland, Ronnie Delaney, goes over, and we had a lovely organiser in Ireland called Brian Clark. And when I came back from the first meeting, I had contributed to the first meeting among my peers. And Brian gave me the most subtle advice, which I followed since. He says to me, Ronnie, I believe you spoke very well and quite extensively at the committee meeting, the committee manager meeting. I knew you were saying, keep your mouth shut until you're some more established within the institution. So I remember that very well. And I remember being down here, was it 1985 or 86?
86.
Jimmy and I both had functions on that day because we had royalty here. It was a fun day, and we both have stories which we can't share with you tonight, but we share them with each other. So I'm delighted to have been invited here, and I want to thank Tony Fennell, because Tony, I think, has been a power force behind the publication of the book as well. I'm sure Jim would agree with that he has been, helping and moving things along. His persuasiveness became very obvious to me, but the other thing that became obvious to me was his organisation capability, because he dotted the I's and crossed the T's for me. So Tony, thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I have a brief from the institution, but a bit like all the speakers before me, I'm not going to go on too long. But I think some of the stats are worth mentioning. And the one I'm most impressed about is the voluntary nature of the institution, the fact that they don't accept money from the government, the fact that the wonderful fundraising that goes on here. The other thing that really impresses me is that only 10% approximately of the entire volunteers, crew volunteers, have a professional connection to the sea. In other words, they don't make their livelihood out of the sea. I think that's remarkable, and it's the essence of the institution. And I think the institution is going to go from strength to strength. Nowadays, the degree of input into training, the degree of input into communication, and I think your PR officer this evening would agree with me. They're giving immense training, and in the hard times that are here, we're getting a great deal of media coverage. Which brings me to the book, because this morning I was on News Talk, and I'm sure you were all listening to RTE and Sean O'Rourke or something. I was on News Talk, and I had the opportunity to plug the book, because I had the opportunity to read it myself and to scan it. And I could just compliment Jim on the absolute professionalism of the entire publication, the immense scholarship that went into it. Already a very acknowledged historian, but this book is extraordinarily interesting, going back to 26, the first lifeboat station ever in Ireland. Extraordinary to think that. I think there are 45 stations in Ireland now. But the history, I said on the radio, difficult to read in the sense it's not an easy read. It's so intense, the coverage that's there. It's based so much on fact, and there's so much heroism and tragedy in this combination. So it's not the easiest read, but what I found very tactile about it was the manner in which it's designed. I love a nice cover. I love pictures. Indeed, I even got my own face into the book. But I love thumbing through, and sometimes they say a picture tells more than 1,000 words. And this is true. It's a very, very tactile book. But most of all, it talks about this wonderful Arklow, place of my birth, place that I'm so proud of. And funny way, I know this may sound immodest. I think some of the quality of the lifeboats I must have absorbed when I was a child here, because I had to be brave in what I did. I had to be courageous in what I did. And I think I owe that to lifeboats in Arklow and the great men who served over many years, and the women and men who are here today. And finally, I'd like to say, so many people connected to the fundraising are here tonight. Charity is a charity. Lifeboats do not take money from government. And the multitudinous effort that's made throughout the country by volunteers on the fundraising side is very much appreciated by the institution. And I applaud the people who make their contribution. Where some little child once gave a penny into a basket down here, and he'd been ridiculed for it. And that child said, no, that may save a life someday. And, you know, that's the essence and that's the end result of it. So, to the cocks and the crew, continue the extraordinary work you're doing. Continue the great tradition of heroism, volunteerism, and continue the marvelous saving of lives at sea. And one of the stats that I don't think is out there is an educational one. It's not the lives that are saved at sea, but what the education process and what the warning process and the training process gets people who won't take their boat out without knowing the weather course, like Jimmy did many years ago. And I'd love to know what the statistics of that are. So my job tonight, and again I thank you for inviting me, Tony, and I thank the station for inviting me. My job tonight is to launch what I think is a terribly important book. It's a book which has wider implications than Arklow. It's huge implications for the whole country and the whole tradition of Irish lifeboats. So with great pleasure, Jim Rees, my warmest congratulations. I formally launched to the bank. Launched, that's a good word.
Yes.
I formally launched to the banks and beyond. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.